The hull screamed as electricity poured through metal that had never been meant to carry it. Every surge drove another crack across the cockpit frame. One engine drifted out of alignment. The patrol ships were closing. Ahead waited a relay that could stop a manufactured war, but only if an exhausted engineer chose to destroy the only ship keeping him alive. Across from him, the woman whose authority had once condemned him could do nothing except watch the cost unfold in real time. Welcome to Gravity and Stardust. This is the story of how one impossible choice forced two enemies to rebuild a civilization before it destroyed itself. The first vibration was so faint that most of Meridian never noticed it. Owen hailed it. His wrench paused halfway through a calibration cycle beneath an access panel. The sound wasn't loud. It wasn't even unusual. What stopped him was its rhythm. The station wasn't settling. It was being forced. He pressed a handheld strain gauge against the maintenance bulkhead. Thin lines rippled across the display. They spread in several directions at once, then folded back toward the convoy's shared structural lattice. Multiple stress fronts. Not one failure. Several. His stomach tightened. A single compartment could rupture on its own. An entire convoy could not. Someone had made it happen. The emergency network erupted before the thought had fully formed. Hull breach. Pressure loss. Civilian evacuation. The overhead lights shifted to emergency power. Across the engineering bay, technicians reached instinctively for escape routes. Owen reached for a storage cabinet instead. Inside sat portable atmosphere packs, emergency sealant, and thermal blankets. He loaded everything he could carry. The nearest transit corridor had already become a river of frightened civilians. A child stumbled. An elderly Lyran scientist tried to lift a collapsed supply crate blocking the passage. Owen crossed the corridor without hesitation, braced one shoulder beneath the twisted frame, and shoved until the path opened. Keep moving. The scientist didn't answer. She simply pulled the child forward and disappeared into the crowd. Another tremor rolled through Meridian. Harder this time. Ceiling panels rattled overhead. Fine dust drifted through the emergency lighting. Owen checked the strain gauge again. The fracture pattern had grown. Not wider. Longer. It continued spreading through shared support members, linking one civilian vessel to another. The convoy itself was carrying the damage. A young Terran corporal ran toward him, breathing hard. Escape craft 4 is still open. Owen looked once toward the evacuation corridor, then toward the engineering trunk descending beneath the deck. If the trunk failed, emergency power would vanish across multiple connected ships before half the civilians reached safety. I'll catch the next one. The corporal stared for a heartbeat, then sprinted toward the docks. Owen dropped into the maintenance shaft. Heat wrapped around him immediately. Emergency conduits pulsed along both sides of the narrow passage. Structural sensors flashed through layers of diagnostic color as fresh stress propagated across the convoy. His wrist display updated. Hull integrity, 61%. Engineering trunk cascade. For minutes, 11 seconds. He climbed faster. The engineering junction lay behind a warped service hatch. He forced it open and pressed the strain gauge against the exposed frame. The pattern resolved almost instantly. Independent fracture branches. Different origins. One destination. The shared lattice connecting Meridian's civilian convoy. His pulse slowed instead of rising. The numbers had answered the question. This wasn't a chain reaction. It was a coordinated attack. Owen reached the distribution manifold just as the first transmission bus failed. The lights dimmed. Emergency power recovered a second later, but the delay had already told him what mattered. The failure wasn't random. One branch had been isolated before the overload spread. He dropped to one knee and pulled away the scorched access cover. The relay housing looked ruined. Melted insulation clung to the casing. Copper glowed beneath layers of carbon. He ignored the relay. His meter traced the current upstream instead. The conductor feeding the unit had fractured beneath its insulation. Replacing the relay would accomplish nothing. He cut away the damaged section, stripped fresh cable from an emergency repair spool, and locked a temporary bridge into place with compression clamps. No solder. No wasted seconds. He restored the circuit. Power stabilized across the manifold. Only then did the station shake again. A sharp electromagnetic pulse swept through the engineering deck. Displays flickered. Several maintenance terminals went dark before rebooting. One screen never returned. Instead, a hidden emergency beacon appeared beneath the static. Biometric containment. Owen frowned. The marker didn't belong anywhere near civilian engineering spaces. He copied its location and followed the signal. The corridor beyond looked different from the evacuation routes above. Bodies lay where they had fallen. Most showed no visible wounds. Emergency doors had sealed automatically, trapping everything inside. The beacon stopped beyond the final blast door. The manual release refused to move. Power remained active. The lock had been intentionally secured. Owen examined the hinges instead. Repeated pressure cycles had weakened the lower mounting plate. He wedged a hydraulic spreader into the gap, shifted the load away from the locking bolts, and forced the door sideways until the damaged hinge tore free. The opening widened just enough. Cold air spilled into the corridor. Inside stood a transparent containment cylinder surrounded by 3 biometric restraint frames. Every restraint remained active. Every indicator still showed green. The woman inside opened her eyes before he spoke. She watched him for a moment. Then her gaze settled on the repair pack hanging from his shoulder. "You repaired the trunk." It wasn't a question. Owen glanced at the silent room. "You saw that from in here?" "I sensed the instability before your instruments finished correcting it." He looked toward the containment controls. No surveillance feeds remained active. Only the restraint system still held power. A protected registry appeared when he connected his maintenance terminal. Protected constitutional asset, no name, no rank, only constitutional protection status. 3 biometric restraints surrounded the chamber. Visible, symmetrical, too obvious. Owen stopped before touching them. Emergency restraint systems rarely trusted appearances. He opened the maintenance schematic instead. A 4th conductor ran beneath the floor, hidden from normal service diagrams. It linked directly to the restraint controller. A failsafe. If the visible restraints failed together, the concealed circuit would trigger a permanent lockdown. He disconnected the hidden conductor first. Only then did he release the remaining restraints one by one. The containment field dissolved without alarm. The woman stepped out slowly, steadying herself against the edge of the cylinder. She had been imprisoned for a long time. She had not forgotten how to observe. "Response teams are already moving," she said quietly. "They'll secure every constitutional route." "You know who's coming?" "I know the procedures." She studied the corridor outside the chamber. "They'll assume I never left this room until they verify the restraints. Minutes. Nothing more. Enough to disappear." Owen handed her a spare atmosphere pack. She accepted it without gratitude or suspicion. Only necessity. As they reached the exit, another protected file unlocked automatically. This time, the registry included a name. Aaron Thale. A second line resolved beneath it as the emergency translator completed its legal dictionary. Constitutional Sovereign. One final translation replaced the formal title with the nearest Terran equivalent. Queen. Neither of them stopped walking. The survey cutter slipped free of Meridian's docking cradle under maneuvering thrusters alone. The main engines answered with a low vibration, then fell silent. Owen dropped beneath the flight console and removed the engineering access panel. Dense bundles of power conduits filled the compartment. "The reactor's online," he said. "The engines aren't receiving it." Aaron settled into the co-pilot seat without reaching for the controls. Her attention stayed on the instruments. "The docking perimeter has begun tracking departures." "You can tell from passive traffic?" "I can tell from procedure." The cutter drifted on momentum while Owen called up the internal power architecture stored in protected maintenance memory. 3 transmission branches had isolated themselves after the attack. Automatic damage control. Perfectly reasonable. Completely useless now. He reached deep into the compartment until his arm disappeared beneath the bundled cables. One relay housing had blistered from overload, but the relay itself still tested within tolerance. The break lay farther upstream. He followed resistance instead of color codes. A less experienced technician would have replaced the relay. The relay wasn't the problem. The conductor feeding it had fractured beneath the insulation. He cut away the damaged section and secured a braided emergency cable across the gap with compression clamps. Fast. Reliable. No heat required. He re-engaged the transmission bus. The engines responded with restrained thrust. Enough to fly, not enough to trust. The display updated. Transmission efficiency, 92%. Thermal loss increasing. The temporary bridge restored propulsion by allowing part of the electrical load to bleed into secondary structural members. Safe for a short escape. Risky over distance. The cutter accelerated beyond Meridian's exclusion zone. Outside, shattered convoy sections drifted apart in slow silence. A broken cargo spine folded around its fractured center while sheets of reflective insulation scattered into widening arcs. No distress calls crossed the radio spectrum. Only automated emergency beacons remained. Aaron watched the passive receiver. They're ignoring survivors. They're following priorities. They're following me. There was no pride in her voice. Only certainty. Owen entered a new heading. If they know you escaped, every checkpoint becomes hostile. Every constitutional relay becomes dangerous. He glanced at her. I thought the relays were our safest destination. They remain our only lawful destination. The distinction stayed with him. A warning appeared across the engineering display. Power distribution imbalance. He expanded the fault map. The temporary bridge had introduced a measurable impedance difference between the port and starboard transmission trunks. Small enough for propulsion, large enough to matter if perfect synchronization ever became necessary. He archived the measurement. Aaron noticed. You kept the fault. I keep every measurement. Even the ones you can't fix? Especially those. She accepted the answer with a slight shift of her attention back to the instruments. The passive receiver chimed. 3 distant contacts. No targeting emissions. No active radar. Someone was estimating the cutter's course from its escape trajectory. They're predicting us, Owen said. They're predicting an engineer. He altered course by 6 degrees. The maneuver consumed more reaction mass than he wanted, but it forced the pursuing ships to widen their search pattern. Time. Nothing else. The engineering display deducted the cost from the remaining reserves. Aaron activated an encrypted constitutional archive stored within the implant behind her ear. Owen's handheld sensor registered a faint sequence of electromagnetic pulses. The implant wasn't contacting the network. It was searching for one. A single indicator remained dark. Another flickered briefly before disappearing. She closed the archive. They've severed more than communications. You confirmed that? I confirmed silence where there should have been replies. He leaned back from the console. What are they keeping you alive for? Her hand rested lightly against the inactive authentication interface beneath her collar. My authority ends if I die. She paused. It also begins there. He understood enough to stop asking. Another glance at the engineering readout. The impedance imbalance remained unchanged. A small flaw, easy to overlook. He saved the measurement again before sealing the access panel. The cutter continued toward the nearest constitutional relay, carrying a repair that would keep it moving, and a tiny electrical mismatch neither of them yet understood would decide far more than the fate of a single ship. The relay station emerged from the darkness as a narrow ring wrapped around a central spine. Its navigation beacons flashed with perfect precision against a horizon filled with damaged infrastructure. Owen reduced thrust until the survey cutter became little more than drifting mass. No active scan, he said. We don't need one. Aaron kept her eyes on the station. If constitutional traffic still exists, the relay will announce itself through timing. She closed her eyes for a moment. The implant beneath her skin produced a faint electromagnetic rhythm. Owen's handheld sensor detected it immediately. It wasn't communication. It was resonance. The station answered with nothing. She opened her eyes. One synchronization channel is gone. You can tell from that. I can tell from what's missing. He accepted the answer without pretending to understand it. The cutter drifted toward an auxiliary maintenance berth instead of the primary docking ring. Less exposure. More manual work. The airlock cycled on stored pressure alone. Beyond it, the station felt strangely balanced. Artificial gravity still functioned, but only in isolated sections. Every few steps, body weight shifted just enough to force constant adjustment. No drifting debris. No rescue crews. No frozen bodies. Only an aging station struggling to preserve its own geometry. Owen connected his diagnostic bridge to a maintenance terminal. The relay ignored outside requests. Local engineering access still responded. Power reserves remained stable. Core processors were online. Synchronization services were unavailable. He opened the engineering logs instead of the operations summary. A relay synchronization lattice measured transmission impedance across every constitutional node before permitting sovereign authentication. One column caught his attention immediately. Tolerance drift. The same phenomenon created by his temporary engine repair. Only this time, it stretched across an entire network. He enlarged the graph. This station isn't damaged where I expected. It isn't. Aaron stepped beside the console. The transmitters still work. The timing doesn't. He compared neighboring measurements. Signal quality remained excellent. Phase alignment did not. Something farther away is missing. She nodded slightly. The relay no longer knows where the constitutional network ends. A protected engineering partition requested sovereign verification. She hesitated, only for a heartbeat. Then she placed 2 fingers on the authorization surface. The implant behind her ear emitted another controlled sequence. Access granted. Owen stepped back instead of reading over her shoulder. She noticed. You aren't looking. You opened a constitutional archive. You could. I wasn't invited. Silence settled between them. A moment later, she turned the display toward him herself. 3 regional relay clusters appeared. One was inactive. Another remained connected but had drifted beyond synchronization tolerance. The last still maintained quorum, but only within its own region. A local relay could verify identity. It could not change constitutional authority without synchronized agreement from the wider network. Owen followed the engineering pathways instead of the legal notes. The timing budget is too tight. It has to be. If one relay could rewrite authority on its own, it wouldn't be constitutional. He studied the architecture again. Every safeguard designed to prevent political seizure also prevented isolated recovery after coordinated sabotage. The system had behaved exactly as it was designed to behave. He rested one hand against the console. So even if we reach this relay, it can't revoke anything. Because the network can't verify itself. Yes, she answered quietly. Not because she doubted the conclusion. Because she had expected a different one. Owen reopened the cutter's engineering logs. The impedance measurement from his temporary repair remained exactly where he had saved it. A tiny electrical mismatch could prevent precise synchronization. Across an interstellar constitutional lattice, losing entire relay groups produced the same result on a much larger scale. The principle hadn't changed. Only the scale had. A muted vibration passed through the station. Not an explosion. Docking clamps. Someone had entered the outer perimeter. Owen disconnected his diagnostic bridge at once. The relay retained no evidence of their visit. Moments later, the cutter's passive receiver captured fragments of encrypted traffic leaking through maintenance systems. Relay remains outside constitutional tolerance. Maintain perimeter. Priority asset expected. Professional voices. Methodical. They already understood why someone would come here. Aaron closed the protected archive. I believed another relay cluster might still be synchronized. You couldn't verify that from prison. No. You acted on incomplete information. I did. He secured the diagnostic bridge inside his repair pack. Our destination changes. Our objective doesn't. Before leaving, he looked once more at the relay's central transmission spine. Repairing this station would accomplish nothing while the constitutional lattice remained fragmented elsewhere. The answer had never been a single relay. It had always been the network behind it. As they returned to the cutter, Aaron removed a sealed constitutional navigation module from inside her cloak. She held it for a moment before offering it to Owen. It contains authenticated maintenance routes known only to the Crown Continuity Authority. He accepted the sealed module without opening it. Neither of them mistook the exchange for trust. It was simply the shortest path left between 2 responsibilities that were beginning to converge. Minutes later, the survey cutter slipped away under minimal thrust, leaving behind a relay that still obeyed every law it had been built to enforce. Even after those same laws had become the reason it could no longer save anyone. The maintenance corridor marked on the constitutional navigation module no longer existed. Gravitational tides had folded the original transit lane into overlapping pockets of distorted space. Owen flew by inertial reference alone, making tiny corrections only after comparing the cutter's motion against distant pulsars stored in the navigation computer. The engines answered every command. The temporary transmission bridge did not. A warning appeared on the engineering display. Port starboard impedance difference increasing. He acknowledged it and kept flying. Aaron unfolded the sealed navigation module for the first time. Authentication markers spread across the display, identifying constitutional maintenance nexuses instead of public relay stations. Most remained dark. One responded. Weakly. Maintenance Nexus 17. Operational. No. She switched to the engineering layer. The relay infrastructure surrounding the Nexus had gone silent years earlier, yet its maintenance diagnostics still repeated the same synchronization request at fixed intervals. Waiting. Nothing more. Owen compared the timing pattern with the impedance measurement he had archived after repairing the cutter's power trunk. The curves matched. Different scale. Identical behavior. Phase drift. Aaron turned the display toward him. The relay cluster never stopped requesting consensus. It stopped reaching it. He overlaid both datasets. A missing relay did more than reduce capacity. Every surviving node kept compensating for an authority that never answered. Each correction pushed the remaining network farther outside synchronization tolerance. The system had been drifting for a long time. The passive receiver awakened. Fragments of authenticated constitutional traffic slipped through the background noise before fading again. One packet survived. Owen routed it through engineering tools instead of the translator. Checksum. Timing markers. Relay identifiers. The message had never been written for ordinary readers. Aaron studied the raw data. Open the consensus table. He did. 3 constitutional regions appeared. One still maintained internal synchronization. The second had drifted beyond allowable phase variance. The third no longer contained enough responding relays to establish quorum. The Royal Continuity Relay still existed. Its hardware had survived. Its authority had not. Owen replayed the packet. The numbers stayed the same. He removed the constitutional navigation module from its cradle and connected it directly to the engineering console. The module searched automatically. One relay answered. The response ended almost immediately. Consensus insufficient. No fault report. No damage warning. Only a constitutional condition that could no longer be satisfied. He leaned back. We've been flying toward the wrong objective. Aaron reviewed the engineering tables in silence. Then she reached the same conclusion. The relay isn't the system. No. The network is. She closed the display. Their original plan had assumed that reaching the Royal Continuity Relay would restore lawful authority. The relay had never possessed that power by itself. It had always depended on neighboring constitutional nodes remaining synchronized. The prison, the silent relay, the abandoned timing channels, the dismantled infrastructure. Every piece had been visible from the beginning. Neither of them had assembled the pattern correctly. The navigation computer recalculated. The Royal Continuity Relay remained within reach. Its strategic value had almost disappeared. Maintenance Nexus 17 became the new destination. The route grew longer. Fuel requirements increased. Survival estimates fell. The engineering model updated automatically. Restoring constitutional quorum would require dormant relay nodes to regain synchronization before the Royal Continuity Relay could lawfully review any strategic authorization. One objective had become 3. None could be skipped. Outside the canopy, distorted gravity stretched the surrounding starlight into uneven bands. The cutter crossed another invisible shear boundary. The phase error inside Owen's temporary repair climbed again before settling into a new equilibrium. He watched the value stabilize. The same rule governed both machines. Small mismatches accumulated until the entire system lost agreement. He disconnected the navigation module. Our course changes. Aaron checked the revised solution. The maintenance nexus. It comes first. The survey cutter rolled away from the direct approach to the Royal Continuity Relay. The shortest path remained behind them. The only path that could still produce a lawful outcome lay ahead. Maintenance Nexus 17 rotated so slowly that its motion became visible only against the distant stars. The station had never been built for abandonment. It had simply survived longer than the people assigned to maintain it. Owen matched the cutter's drift to the station instead of forcing a hard docking. The damaged transmission bridge distributed power unevenly through the engine mounts. Every burst of thrust felt slightly different from the last. A low harmonic vibration traveled through the hull. Not dangerous. Not yet. Aaron studied the structural telemetry. The imbalance increased again. It always does under load. Can it be stabilized? It can be managed. The magnetic clamps engaged on the second attempt. One failed to lock completely. Owen balanced the remaining load with a short pulse from the attitude thrusters before cycling the airlock. Darkness filled the station, but it wasn't empty. A thin crystalline sheen covered the walls, conduit housings, inspection rails, even faded warning labels. Moisture trapped decades earlier had migrated through microscopic fractures before freezing beneath the protective coatings. Owen placed one careful step onto the deck. The ice remained intact. The metal beneath it answered with a dry crack. A web of tiny fractures spread across the plating before stopping beneath his boot. The alloy itself had become brittle. They descended through a maintenance shaft using anchored safety lines. Several ladder rungs had snapped away long ago, leaving only polished stubs welded into the walls. Halfway down, Erin stopped. She tilted her head slightly. Owen checked his instruments. Nothing. A heartbeat later, the station's emergency gravity field corrected itself. Weight shifted sideways, then settled again. You sensed that first. The synchronization field drifted. You can feel it. My implant shares its timing reference with constitutional infrastructure. She looked toward the station's core. It shouldn't drift inside a maintenance nexus. Only then did Owen's display confirm the fluctuation. Her implant had reacted before the engineering sensors completed their cycle. Neither of them mentioned it again. The relay chamber occupied the center of the station. 3 constitutional coupler housings surrounded the synchronization frame. 2 remained sealed. The third stood empty. It hadn't been torn away. It had been removed with care. The mounting bolts showed no damage. Cable bundles ended beneath protective caps. Every disconnected interface had been preserved against corrosion. Owen crouched beside the vacant cradle. No salvage marks. No haste. Erin rested her hand against the identification plate beneath the empty mount. Recognition crossed her face. I approve this maintenance standard. He looked at the preserved interfaces. They followed your procedures, so future engineers could replace failed components safely. The standard had worked exactly as intended. It had also allowed someone to dismantle the network one lawful procedure at a time. Owen opened the cutter's fabrication inventory through a remote link. Conductive lattice. Available. Ceramic substrate. Available. Synchronization crystal. Unavailable. Everything depended on the missing component. He walked slowly around the chamber, measuring instead of searching. Cable resistance remained within specification. Power conditioning modules still functioned. Mechanical alignment had survived. The relay could receive constitutional timing. It simply had nothing left to generate it. Erin connected to the local maintenance archive through an optical reader. No network was required. Only preserved engineering records. She reviewed the replacement procedures until one section stopped her. The crystal was never manufactured here. Owen joined her beside the terminal. It was transferred. She nodded. The archive displayed the official maintenance sequence. A functioning relay surrendered its synchronization crystal during scheduled replacement. The receiving nexus accepted it. The donor relay entered suspended constitutional service until another crystal arrived. A controlled sacrifice. Routine. Documented. He followed the logistics records. Replacement cycles lasted decades. Emergency transfers required unanimous constitutional approval because every removal temporarily weakened strategic governance across the affected region. The cost had always been understood. He closed the archive. So restoring this nexus means another relay goes silent. For a time, civil emergencies slowed down. Constitutional emergencies, Erin corrected softly. Local governments continue to function. She paused. The fastest lawful decisions do not. Neither outcome erased the other. Every solution carried a price. Far beyond the station, that price would be measured in delayed rescue coordination, stalled emergency authority, and distant systems forced to wait for decisions that could no longer arrive on time. The cutter interrupted the silence. A passive alert appeared across both helmet displays. 3 encrypted contacts. Closing steadily. They hadn't discovered the nexus by accident. Someone had predicted the sequence of repairs required to rebuild constitutional continuity. Owen sealed the archive and disconnected every maintenance lead. Nothing remained except the evidence that had always been there. As they climbed back toward the cutter, another gravity fluctuation passed through the station. This one lingered. Loose equipment slid across the floor before settling into a new angle. The station was losing more than stability. It was beginning to lose its own frame of reference. Back inside the cutter, Owen studied the surviving relay map one last time. He ignored the nearest constitutional route. Instead, He selected the only operational relay whose temporary silence would leave the fewest inhabited systems waiting for lawful consensus. The survival estimate dropped again. He accepted the course without changing the calculation. Across the cockpit, Erin secured the maintenance archive inside a protected compartment before fastening herself into the co-pilot's seat. She never asked him to reconsider. She had already approved one engineering standard whose consequences had spread farther than anyone intended. Neither of them would treat the next decision lightly. The operational relay circled a dim red dwarf far beyond the primary shipping lanes. No civilian traffic crossed its approach corridor. Every authorized vessel had already been redirected. Owen studied the tactical display without emitting a single active signal. Passive reflections gradually revealed the relay's defensive perimeter. They've narrowed the possibilities. They don't know where we're going. They know what we'll need. Erin overlaid the maintenance archive recovered from Nexus 17. Only one relay within practical range could surrender its synchronization crystal while disrupting the fewest inhabited systems. Anyone analyzing the same constraints would reach the same conclusion. They've stopped chasing us, she said. They're waiting where the answer is. Owen altered course toward an abandoned orbital construction yard. Thousands of unfinished trusses, pressure tanks, and magnetic crane assemblies drifted around the star in tangled layers. Their scattered geometry broke clean sensor solutions into fragments. The cutter slipped inside the maze under minimal thrust. The damaged transmission bridge responded immediately. A low vibration spread through the ship's frame. The tone shifted each time Owen adjusted engine output, as though the cutter itself had become part of the electrical circuit. He watched the engineering readout. Frame resonance. Higher than before. Still inside operational limits. Barely. The relay disappeared behind overlapping construction segments, while the cutter threaded through narrow gaps between unfinished structures. Passive contacts multiplied. Patrol ships. Holding position. Waiting for movement. Erin compared their formation. They've left one corridor open. Owen measured the geometry again. They want someone to believe it's open. He chose a narrower route. The autopilot rejected it immediately. He switched to manual control. Short bursts from the reaction thrusters guided the cutter through the maze. Each correction sent another pulse through the stressed frame. The resonance climbed again. The first patrol vessel appeared without warning as both ships rounded opposite sides of a rotating cargo ring. Owen killed the engines. The cutter drifted into shadow. The patrol ship continued on inertia, scanning the wider transit corridor instead of the industrial wreckage surrounding it. It passed. Owen restarted the engines. The vibration returned, stronger than before. Fresh deformation appeared around the engine mounts. Nothing failed. Nothing recovered. Every maneuver left a permanent mark. Erin followed the same telemetry. The frame is keeping every load. It can't keep doing that forever. How many burns are left? I don't know. The answer lingered between them. The relay's outer lattice finally emerged beyond the abandoned construction field. So did the defensive screen surrounding it. No obvious gaps. Only overlapping fields of observation arranged to force intruders into predictable choices. Owen eased the engines back. The vibration faded but never disappeared. Residual stress remained locked inside the ship. The damage had become part of its structure. A new alert appeared. It didn't come from the relay. It came from the cutter. The temporary transmission bridge had begun oscillating against its own repair frequency. Every increase in engine power now amplified the structural resonance instead of simply driving propulsion. Owen isolated the data. Then he opened the measurements he had archived after escaping Meridian. Finally, he compared both sets with the synchronization failures spreading across the constitutional network. The pattern matched. Small mismatches accumulated until the system could no longer remain aligned. He sat in silence for several seconds. Every repair he had made had solved the immediate crisis. Each one had also consumed part of the cutter's remaining margin, repairing the manifold, bridging the fractured transmission trunk, choosing unstable routes instead of stopping. None of those decisions had been wrong. Together, they had exhausted the ship's ability to survive another compromise. Erin watched him close the engineering data. You found something. I found what we've been spending. She didn't ask for an explanation. She recognized the look on his face. The relay demanded one sacrifice. The cutter demanded another. There was no path left that preserved both. The patrol formation shifted again. Calm. Measured. Another section of open space disappeared from Owen's calculations. His hand settled over the manual power transfer controls beneath the console. The emergency structural bus remained available. He had ignored it from the beginning because activating it would turn the cutter's internal frame into part of the propulsion circuit. The ship would keep flying. It would never be the same afterward. He closed his eyes for the first time since Meridian. One slow breath, then another. When he opened them again, he wasn't searching for a way to save everything. He was deciding what had to survive. The cutter remained motionless inside the abandoned construction yard while the patrol ships tightened their search pattern beyond the drifting framework. No transmission reached the cockpit. None was necessary. Owen reopened the engineering schematic. The emergency structural bus occupied a narrow strip along the edge of the display. Inactive, protected by 3 confirmation locks. It had never been designed to improve propulsion. Its only purpose was to preserve reactor containment after catastrophic internal failures by turning the ship's structural frame into the final electrical return path. Using it in flight violated every maintenance recommendation attached to the design. Not because it would fail, because the ship would never recover from it. He released the first lock. Erin watched the engineering page appear on her display. The frame becomes conductive. Only part of it. The stress won't leave afterward. No. She looked past the console and toward the relay waiting beyond the patrol screen. Then her eyes returned to Owen. She said nothing. For the first time since Meridian, procedure offered her no instruction. Owen transferred the propulsion model into manual mode. The simulation recalculated without filtering damaged systems. Structural resonance climbed. Engine synchronization improved. The contradiction disappeared as soon as he understood it. The frame itself completed the circuit. He armed the structural bus. Warning indicators filled the console. Emergency return path enabled. Frame fatigue irreversible. Reactor safety margin reduced. He accepted every condition. Power surged through the ship. The uneven vibration that had followed them since escaping Meridian collapsed into a single steady tone. For the first time, both engines received identical electrical timing. The cost appeared elsewhere. Fresh strain spread across structural members that had never been meant to carry current. The ship stopped protecting itself. It began consuming itself in a controlled pattern. Owen rotated the cutter toward the relay. One pass. Erin checked the projected approach. If we miss, we won't get another. She entered her constitutional authorization into the maintenance module recovered from Nexus 17. Not to command the relay, to begin the maintenance sequence waiting inside it. Every authentication challenge completed locally. None required network consensus. The relay still obeyed maintenance law. Only constitutional authority remained suspended. The cutter emerged from cover. Patrol sensors reacted immediately. Targeting systems locked onto the approaching ship. No weapons fired. The relay still had to be protected from unnecessary damage. Owen advanced the throttles. Electrical current surged through the structural bus. Another support rib yielded beyond its elastic limit. The engines stayed synchronized. The ship grew weaker. Acceleration increased. The first patrol vessel crossed their path. Owen rolled beneath it using reaction thrusters instead of the main engines. The maneuver demanded another surge through the conductive frame. A second support member bent permanently. The vibration held steady. Ahead, the relay's maintenance docking collar aligned with the cutter's approach. It had been built for crippled engineering craft unable to maintain perfect flight paths. Owen matched its rotation as closely as the damaged ship allowed. The clamps struck hard. One sheared away. The others held. The impact echoed through the cutter. Warnings flooded every engineering display. He ignored them. Erin reached the maintenance interface before the airlock had fully equalized. The relay recognized the service module. Maintenance authority accepted. Synchronization crystal transfer requested. The relay paused. Its engineering core evaluated the request exactly as the archived procedures required. Temporary constitutional degradation. Estimated duration. Population impact. Maintenance necessity. Every consequence appeared before approval. Erin placed her hand on the authorization surface. I confirm. The relay accepted. Deep inside the station, dormant mechanical systems awakened. A protected transfer conduit opened. The synchronization crystal began moving toward the maintenance cradle. Outside, The patrol commanders abandoned identification procedures. Weapons armed. Owen disconnected external power before the transfer completed. If they disable the station now, the transfer stops, and the relay keeps its crystal. She understood immediately. He restarted the cutter using internal power alone. The structural bus carried another surge. A sharp crack raced across the cockpit support frame. The canopy held. Barely. The transfer indicator reached completion. Maintenance locks released. Ailen secured the crystal inside its shielded carrier. She looked at Owen only once. The damaged frame around him carried the same current, now driving the engines. Every warning across the console confirmed what she already understood. No doctrine she had ever studied had prepared her for someone choosing to spend a ship this way. The patrol ships opened fire. Not at the relay. At the departing cutter. Owen pushed the remaining engine output to its limit. The structural bus delivered everything the propulsion system demanded. The cutter tore free of the docking collar, just as another engine support failed completely. The ship still accelerated. Its alignment never fully recovered. Fragments of its own internal structure scattered behind it as it escaped with a synchronization crystal obtained without breaking a single constitutional law, and aboard a vessel that could never return to what it had been. The cutter could no longer hold a straight course. Every correction arrived a fraction late, as though the ship hesitated before remembering how to fly. The structural bus remained active, binding the damaged frame into the propulsion circuit. Disconnecting it now would silence one engine forever. Owen stopped trying to restore the original design. He focused on bringing home what remained. The synchronization crystal rested inside its shielded carrier between the cockpit seats. Its containment field drew almost no power, yet every constitutional maintenance beacon within range responded to its presence without exchanging a single transmission. Ailen unfolded the maintenance archive one final time. The surviving operational nexus lay beyond the patrol cordon. Its engineering systems still possessed enough synchronized infrastructure to seed a constitutional lattice if the crystal arrived through authenticated maintenance channels. The relay they had left behind supplied the missing reference. This nexus could restore the missing agreement. Neither could succeed alone. Together, they could. Patrol ships closed from 3 directions. Owen ignored the obvious escape route. It had become the most predictable choice long before they arrived. Instead, he steered toward the edge of a gravitational shear where tidal gradients distorted inertial solutions by tiny fractions. The cutter no longer depended on perfect tolerances. Its damaged frame flexed with each shift in the local field, absorbing errors the flight computer could no longer calculate. The patrol commanders adjusted. Their formation expanded to preserve tracking geometry. The delay lasted only seconds. It was enough. The maintenance nexus accepted the crippled cutter without demanding flight corrections it could no longer perform. Its docking system had always been intended for damaged engineering craft. The clamps met the hull where it actually arrived, not where it should have arrived. Inside the station, Owen carried the synchronization crystal himself. The relay chamber resembled the abandoned nexus they had visited before, except this receiving cradle still waited beneath active environmental control. No one rushed. The maintenance sequence already defined every step. Ailen authenticated the transfer. The chamber remained silent while microscopic lattice structures aligned inside the cradle. The crystal descended. Locked. Power conditioning stabilized. One indicator illuminated. Then another. Across the engineering display, independent timing references that had drifted apart for months began converging toward the same value. Gradually, like pendulums finding the same rhythm. The maintenance core requested regional synchronization. Available relays answered. One, then another. The surviving constitutional lattice rebuilt itself through engineering reference instead of political command. No proclamation followed. No ceremony. Only a maintenance log advancing from suspended to synchronized. A new constitutional packet arrived. Ailen opened it. Owen watched the engineering status instead. The relay had accepted quorum. Not everywhere. Enough. What changed? The extermination authorization. She turned the display toward him. The authorization still existed in the historical record. Its execution authority did not. Once lawful consensus returned, every strategic authorization underwent renewed quorum validation. The network rejected the protocol automatically. No one overruled it. The system simply functioned as it had always been designed to function. Another packet followed. Priority investigations. Relay seizures. Emergency constitutional audits. Every order carried authenticated consensus signatures from authorities that, only hours earlier, had been unable to recognize one another. The machinery of government had resumed. The cost remained. Ailen closed the archive. The regions that lost constitutional access during the transfer, they'll carry that delay. Yes, rescue fleets had waited longer. Emergency decisions had arrived later. No restored network could erase those hours. Outside the Nexus, the patrol ships held position beyond the constitutional exclusion boundary. They neither advanced nor withdrew. Fresh consensus orders had reached them. The officers remained fully capable of fighting. They no longer possessed lawful authority to begin. Owen finally disconnected the structural bus. The port engine fell silent exactly as expected. The remaining engine continued running. The final engineering report appeared. Structural frame, permanently derated. Full propulsion, not recoverable. The cutter would never fly as it had before Meridian. He acknowledged the report and closed it. Some systems could be repaired. Others became part of the price. Ailen removed the insignia identifying her constitutional office and placed it inside the maintenance archive. I approved procedures that allowed the network to be dismantled lawfully. You approved procedures that allowed engineers to replace failing systems safely. They became the same procedure. They did. Neither answer erased the other. She looked through the observation port toward the relay ring, exchanging synchronized timing with distant stations hidden beyond the stars. Then she looked back at the scarred cutter, at the warped frame that still carried the marks of the current Owen had forced through it. And finally at the engineer himself. For the first time, she understood the full measure of what he had chosen to spend. Not a weapon, not a victory, a ship, a future, simply to give the law one more chance to work. Outside, maintenance crews entered the docking bay carrying replacement equipment, inspection tools, and engineering cases. They walked first toward the relay, then toward the crippled cutter that had arrived with one engine, a permanently conductive frame, and damage no repair facility could completely erase. No monument marked what had happened. Only synchronized timing signals crossed the darkness where silence had ruled before. The cutter remained beneath open maintenance panels, forever changed. The constitutional network continued, strengthened by rules that had learned from their own failure. Neither had escaped unchanged. Both endured. And somewhere beyond the relay, the first civilization spared from an unlawful extermination would never know that its future had depended on one engineer who refused to stop repairing broken systems, even when the last system left to spend was his own. Thank you for staying with us through this journey. If you had been in Owen's place, would you have sacrificed the only ship that could save you to preserve a system meant to protect everyone else? Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Galactic Contact for more stories from the edge of humanity and the stars.